There exists a specific moment when a child's life changes forever. It is not dramatic. It is not announced with trumpets or camera flashes. It is silent. It is the moment when she learns that not all places were made for people like her, that there are spaces in the world that close their doors to her subtly, that there are people who look at you and decide in a millisecond whether you belong or not. It was a Saturday afternoon in a luxury shopping mall in California, on one of those days where the sun hits directly on the glass windows and the light seems golden. A 10-year-old girl, Riley, opened the automatic glass doors of a high-end sports store. The type of store where shoes cost more than an entire family's rent for a month. The type of store that makes you feel small when you enter. The minimalist lights, the classical music playing low, the smell of new leather and ambition. The type of place where you can hear your own breathing if your breathing is wrong. Riley was wearing simple jeans that had shrunk in the washing machine, a gray sweatshirt that originally belonged to her cousin, and shoes that her mother had bought on sale at a discount store. It was not the customer uniform that space had been carefully designed to receive. It was not the clothing that the mirrored walls and glass counters said you should be wearing. You can perceive immediately when you do not belong in a place, not just by the clothes, but by the way your body responds, how your breathing becomes shallower, how you walk differently, how your voice becomes quieter. It is impossible not to feel the anxiety that emanates from her as she explores the shelves, gently touching the products as if they were sacred relics that could break if she touched them too hard. Each of her movements was careful, respectful, like a child entering a museum where everything is forbidden to touch. But the museum has not put up a sign saying you should not touch. You just feel that you should not. Her father had made a promise that was sacred. Steph Curry had said on Tuesday night when she arrived home from school, "You know that shoe you want? The one that has your name on it? The one that most of the other kids have but we could not afford last month? We are going together to get that shoe on Saturday. Just you and me." She had slept happy that night, woken up happy that morning, told all her friends she was going to buy that specific shoe, the shoe that meant belonging. But Steph had been stuck in a meeting that extended much longer than expected. So he sent a text message to his daughter. "I am running late, sweetheart. Can you take a look while you wait? I will be there in 15 minutes. Those 15 minutes, that seemingly insignificant period of time, would become a watershed moment, a before and after in a child's history. At the back of the store, observing everything with the careful attention that comes from 15 years of doing exactly the same thing every day, stood Doug Harrison. Doug had been the manager of this store since 2009. He knew every angle of this store like someone knows the lines of their own face in the mirror. Every price, every policy, every rule that he had memorized, that he had internalized, that he had taught to dozens of employees over 15 years. He had completely internalized the unspoken mission of the store. Keep certain types of people inside, those who could spend significantly, those who knew the i.e. brands for real, those who dressed correctly, and others outside. The wrong types, the potential troublemakers, the ones who did not fit. This was not intentional malice. At least, Doug did not believe it was. It was just the way things worked. It was what he had learned. His father had been military. Absolute order, rigid discipline, clear hierarchy. You did not question the chain of command. You followed protocol. His father had died when Doug was 22 years old, and had left this legacy, this absolute belief that there was a right way and a wrong way to do things. His mother had taught at an elite private school. Standard, refinement, correct way to behave. She had reinforced what his father had taught. There were classes of people, and you needed to know which class you belonged to. Doug had grown up absorbing the idea that there was a proper and improper way to be, proper and improper way to appear, proper and improper way to speak. And when you fulfilled this code, when you conformed to the standards, you belonged. You were welcome. You were accepted. When you did not fulfill it, you were left out. You were rejected. You were inadequate. Doug had spent his entire life trying to be the proper type of person so that he would never be left out again. He brought this vision to work. There were protocols for everything. There was a specific protocol for how to greet real customers. A smile, eye contact, an extended hand. There was a completely different protocol for how to speak with people who seemed to be just looking. Polite, but distant, with the clear implication that you had more important customers to attend to. There was a specific protocol, very clear, well documented, for children in the store without paying adults. And that protocol was simple: remove them. Because children without supervision of wealthy adults were a security liability. They were a safety risk. They were inadequate for the space. There was a protocol for keeping the space safe. And by safe, Doug understood protected from people who could not afford to be there. Because if you started letting those people in, feeling welcome, perhaps others would come. And if others came, perhaps the real customers, those with real spending power, would start to feel uncomfortable. Start to think that the store was changing character. Start to shop elsewhere. And Doug had 23 years of experience in luxury retail. He knew that perception was everything. And the perception that the store wanted to project was, this is a space for special people. This is a space where you only belong if you are part of a certain type of person. When Riley touched the $300 sneaker, the sneaker that had her name on it, the sneaker that meant belonging, Doug was there within seconds. His eyes had been trained for 15 years to detect when someone was touching something they should not be touching, when someone was out of place. You should not be touching anything without supervision from a responsible adult, Doug said. His voice had the quality of someone who was reciting a line, who was following a script, who had never questioned whether the words he was saying were right, only whether they fulfilled protocol. His face was composed. His posture was professional. But there was something glacial in his eyes, the quality of someone who had learned not to see people, had learned to see only category, classification, proper or improper. Riley explained, her voice trembling slightly. My father is arriving any minute. He is in a meeting, but he said I could look while I wait. Doug heard this explanation, but he did not incorporate it. It did not change anything. The protocol was clear. Unaccompanied children are a security liability, Doug said. You need to leave the store or wait outside in the hallway. But he said, Riley began. Rules are rules, Doug interrupted. His voice was not unkind exactly. It was just inflexible, like a steel door. You can bang against it as much as you want. It will not yield. When she hesitated, because 10-year-old children still have that quality of hope regarding adults, the quality of believing that if you explain enough, people will understand. Doug made a signal, a small gesture with his hand, and the security guard appeared, a large and polite man who had been trained to be professional about these things, friendly but firm, an elegant escort outside. And so, Riley was led outside, not dragged, not yelled at, just politely guided to the hallway as if she were an object that needed to be moved. In front of other customers, some recognized the girl, some would recognize her face later when the story went viral. Riley felt something die inside her. It was not just the humiliation of being expelled. It was not just the people staring. It was the silent message she received. The message that said, "You do not belong here. People like you do not belong in places like this. You are inadequate. Your family is inadequate. Your appearance, your clothes, your simple existence is out of place." She waited in the hallway, near a window where the golden light of the late afternoon fell warm on her face. And as she waited, something inside her closed off. Not dramatically, not in a way visible to any person who passed by, but internally, a part of her that had hoped, that had dreamed, that had believed she could be part of that world. That part retreated into itself like a slug into a shell. Inside the store, Doug returned to his work. He adjusted a stack of T-shirts, cleaned a mirror that had a stain, chatted with another customer about sizes and colors, and he did not think about the girl anymore. For him, it was just protocol fulfilled. A normal day, an inadequate child removed from a proper space. He did not know who the girl was, and if he had known, perhaps he would have hesitated for a millisecond. Perhaps not. When Steph Curry arrived exactly 23 minutes later, 8 minutes later than he had promised, his daughter told him everything. He saw her waiting in the hallway with that look he knew well, the look of a child who had learned that the world is not always safe, that adults are not always kind, that there are places where you do not belong. His heart simply broke. It was not just the humiliation of being expelled. It was not just the people staring. It was not just the rejection. It was the lesson she had learned, the silent message his daughter had received. You are not adequate. Your clothes are not adequate. Your appearance is not adequate. People like you do not belong in places like this. And as he listened to the story, Steph felt all the rage. That pure rage of a father seeing his daughter hurt, rise in his chest like lava. And he was a professional athlete. He knew how to maintain composure. But for a moment, just one moment, he let his face show the raw anger. The anger of a father seeing his daughter wounded. But as he held that rage, something else began to take shape. Something more calculated. A strategy began to germinate. An opportunity began to appear. Because Steph Curry is not just an extraordinary athlete. He is a man who deeply understands the power of narratives. He understands how a well-told story can change a global conversation, how a transformed moment of humility can inspire millions. And he thought, as he hugged his daughter in the hallway of a shopping mall, what if I could transform this? What if I could transform this moment of pain into something that teaches compassion on a massive scale? He returned to the store 15 minutes later, alone. He left Riley at home with her mother, resting with hot chocolate. And he walked through the automatic glass door of that same store. The reaction was instantaneous. A couple that was browsing T-shirts froze. A woman who was in line looked up. The employees, including Doug, recognized that specific presence, that specific face. Steph Curry, NBA MVP, the man whose shoes were on shelves in stores around the world. The man whose shoes, by the way, this specific store would sell in large quantities because he wore them. Steph walked to the counter with tranquility, a tranquility that came from power. "I need to speak with the manager," he said. His voice was polite calm, but there was a quality in it that made people obey. Doug appeared in less than 1 minute. His face changed when he recognized who it was. He realized immediately why this extraordinary man was in his store. He realized immediately that he had made a mistake. But which mistake exactly? That was the problem. He had not yet processed that he had actually done something wrong. "Can I speak with you in private?" Steph asked. In the office, a small gray space with a glass desk and photographs of sales performance on the walls, Steph was direct. No threats, no aggression, just clarity. "You humiliated my daughter today," Steph said. "You made her feel as if she did not deserve to be here. You made a 10-year-old child learn a lesson that nobody should learn so early. That there are places in this world where she does not belong. That there are people, like you, who see her and immediately decide that she is inadequate." Doug lowered his head. He expected verbal violence. He expected aggression. He expected to hear about lawsuits. Instead, he heard clarity. And clarity hurts more, because it leaves no room for you to defend yourself. But then Steph said something unexpected. Something that completely changed the trajectory of that confrontation. "And I can see that you were just doing your job." Doug looked up, confused. "You did not wake up today thinking about how you would hurt a child," Steph continued. "You followed a protocol that was taught to you. You fulfilled a policy. You were being diligent. I understand that." This understanding, this acceptance that Doug was more a product of his system than a villain, was almost worse than direct accusation. Because it meant that Steph was not going to destroy Doug. Steph was going to educate him. And education hurts in a different way. "Let me ask you a question," Steph continued. "Did you know it was my daughter when you expelled her? And did you choose to treat her that way because it was my daughter?" "No," Doug answered honestly. "I did not know who she was." "And if you had known?" Doug hesitated, because the honest answer was, probably yes. The rules were the rules. "So," Steph said, "it is not personal. It is systemic. Do you treat all children like this? Do you treat all people who seem out of place like this?" Doug nodded slowly. "Yes." And then came the proposal. The thing that would transform everything. "Work with me," Steph said. It was not a question. It was an invitation to a journey that Doug had never imagined in his wildest dreams. "Let us create a program. Let us call it Everyone Belongs. Let us use your experience. You have worked in a luxury store for 15 years. You understand exactly how these machines work. Combined with my platform to teach corporations across the country how to serve everyone, not just the customers who look right." Doug could not speak. "You can destroy my career if you want," he continued, and there was an uncomfortable truth in that. "You can go speak to the newspapers that I am a demanding father who does not accept that children need to follow rules. You can destroy my credibility. But that does not change anything. My daughter will still grow up believing she does not belong in certain places. Other children will still learn the same lesson every day. And you will still be expelling children from stores. So why do we not do something different?" Doug asked, his voice trembling a little. "Why are you doing this? Why are you not destroying my life?" And Steph responded with something that Doug would never forget. "Because you are exactly the type of person who needs to be in this conversation. Because if you change, really change, your employees will change. If your employees change, the culture changes. You have the power to change how hundreds of people, perhaps thousands, see the world. And I am offering you the opportunity to use that power to do good. Do you accept?" The first months were incredibly uncomfortable. Doug accepted the proposal initially because he was afraid, because he knew that Steph Curry, with one social media post, could destroy his career and his reputation, because the alternative was total disaster. But as he began to work with Steph, something began to change. The fear began to transform into something deeper, into genuine discomfort, into genuine questioning, into confrontation with everything he had learned. You feel the weight of truth when someone places it right in front of you, when you cannot escape. And Steph did exactly that. He took Doug to communities that Doug had never visited, communities where the people he had been expelling from stores lived, communities where mothers saved money for months to buy their children the same type of clothing he sold. They visited a community center in East LA. They visited a school in South Central. They visited a mentoring organization for low-income children. And in each place, Doug saw mothers who avoided entering luxury stores. He saw men who did not buy certain products because they thought they would be judged for appearing in a place where they obviously did not belong. He saw children who, like Riley, had learned too early that not all places were made for people like them. Each conversation was like a hammer hitting glass. Glass that Doug had built around himself over 15 years. There was a specific moment that broke him completely. A mother named Maria at a community center shared a story. She had a son named Carlos who loved basketball. He was an intelligent, diligent boy with a bright future ahead. And he wanted the same shoe that Steph Curry wore. He knew exactly which one it was, could describe every detail. Maria had saved money for 8 months to buy that shoe for her son. 8 months. From working 2 jobs. Her son had been patient, hopeful, dreaming about that shoe as a symbol that he could be like Steph Curry one day. But when Maria had finally saved enough, she had not entered Doug's store. "I did not feel like I would be welcome," she said. "I looked at the pictures in the windows and thought, this is not for people like us. So I bought online." Doug heard this story, and suddenly he saw himself in that store. He saw himself as the barrier, as the person who had the power to say yes or no, as the person who had decided, with a single glance, that some belonged and others did not. And he realized, in the most painful way possible, that he had been the barrier between a child and a dream. He cried, not in a controlled or composed way, but in an uncontrolled way. The type of crying that comes when you finally confront a truth about yourself that you can no longer ignore. Steph saw that crying and knew that transformation had truly begun. When Doug returned to his store, he was a different person. He started small, greeting every child who entered, asking their names, listening to their stories, realizing that there were people, not just categories, that there were dreams, not just protocols. The Everyone Belongs program was launched at a major luxury retail conference in California. More than 2,000 managers and store owners. Doug was invited to speak. He did not want to get on that stage. He was afraid. But Steph had insisted. "You are the story," Steph said. "Your before and after. That is what will touch people." Doug walked onto the stage in front of 2,000 people. His hands trembled. His heart beat fast. But when he began to speak, in a calm voice, but with emotion he could not contain, that fear disappeared. He was speaking truth, and truth does not need fake courage. "I thought I was keeping my store safe," Doug said, "but I was keeping people out. People like a 10-year-old girl who just wanted to come in and look at some shoes. I expelled her because she did not look like the type of customer I thought should be there. And it was someone I had harmed, truly harmed, who offered me the opportunity to be better. That is the story that needs to be told, that redemption is possible, that people can change, that education is more powerful than punishment. The program was revolutionary in its simplicity. It trained managers to recognize their own bias, not through impersonal classes, but through stories. Doug led these sessions personally. He shared genuine vulnerability. He modeled real transformation. He showed that growth was possible and painful and absolutely necessary. One of the training sessions in Los Angeles had a transformative moment. A manager named Marcus, a man who had worked in a luxury store for 20 years, heard Doug's story and cried. "I am you," he said. "I am you 10 years ago. How many children have I expelled? How many families have I made feel unwelcome?" And in that moment, Marcus realized that there was power in admitting error. There was freedom in confronting truth. And it began to happen. Mothers taking children to shop without fear of being judged. Men buying products they wanted, makeup, clothes, anything, without being questioned about appropriateness. Children feeling welcome in spaces that previously made them feel small. Families enjoying a place that previously excluded them systematically. Within 3 months, 50 stores. Within 6 months, 200 stores. Within 1 year, 500 stores. Thousands of employees trained. Hundreds of impact stories beginning to appear on the internet, on social media, in conversations around dinner tables. 1 year later, the Everyone Belongs program was in 500 luxury retail stores across the country. But the numbers were just numbers, statistics. They meant nothing compared to the stories. The real numbers that mattered were measured in human stories, in invisible transformations, in those private moments where a child enters a store and does not leave feeling small, in those moments where a father finally feels that his child belongs, in those moments where a mother who saved for 8 months can enter a space that previously made her feel inadequate. Because it is easy to count stores, it is easy to count trainings, but how do you count the number of children who did not learn too early that they do not belong? How do you quantify validation? How do you measure the impact of someone, a child, leaving a place feeling seen? Stories of invisible transformation that happened every day. There was a girl in Phoenix, not different from Riley, who entered a luxury sports store alone for the first time in her life. The manager, trained by Doug's program, greeted her personally, asked her name, asked what she was looking for. And when she explained that she wanted that specific shoe, the shoe that meant belonging, the manager did not just sell. He placed that shoe on her feet carefully, as if blessing an important moment. And when she left, she did not leave feeling small. She left feeling seen. There was a father in Detroit who finally had the courage to enter a luxury store to buy for his son the EDE, equipment the boy had wanted for years. The boy was in a wheelchair, had a disability that made him different. The father had avoided that store because he thought he would not be welcome. But the manager, trained, attentive, educated by Doug, greeted him like any other customer. Better. With a genuine understanding that every customer had a story. The boy left that store feeling like any other child. Important. Belonging. There were hundreds of stories like this. Stories of people who learned that they truly belonged. Stories of children who did not learn too early that the world did not want them. Doug changed. You can see in someone when they have truly transformed. Doug was no longer the rigid manager who had expelled a child. He was an educator, a spokesperson, a man who had confronted the worst version of himself, and deliberately chose to be better. He traveled to conferences across the country, spoke at universities, appeared on podcasts, shared his story, not as someone asking for compassion, but as someone offering a mirror so that others could see their own prejudices reflected in him, so that others could recognize themselves. "I was wrong," he would say on every stage. "I was secure in my wrongness because nobody confronted me. But then someone had the courage not to destroy me for being wrong. Steph Curry had every right to destroy me. I deserved to be destroyed, professionally, reputationally. But instead, he offered an opportunity. And now, every day, I am dedicated to offering that same opportunity to every manager I meet." Steph's daughter, that same girl who had been humiliated on that day when everything changed, now worked with her father on the program. She was 11 years old when it all began. Now she was 12. She knew Doug, not as the man who humiliated me, but as a mentor, as someone who had genuinely redeemed himself. And she learned a lesson that most people never learn so early: that people can change, that redemption is possible, that humility is power. When you offer compassion to someone who did not deserve it, you create an asset. You transform an enemy into an ally. Doug became the program's greatest advocate because he had been the problem. And now he was part of the solution. The story went viral. Not because it was sensational, but because it was true. Because it was about genuine redemption. Because it was about choice. Steph Curry chose not to destroy. Doug chose not to become bitter. And, together, they chose to transform pain into purpose. Millions watched. Millions began to question their own prejudices. If a rigid manager can change, they thought, can I also? What is my version of Doug? Where am I blind to the ways I am excluding people? The conversation about justice began to change, from retribution to redemption, from punishment to transformation, from destroying the enemy to educating the enemy. Because the greatest act of resistance is not to destroy someone. It is to transform them into an ally. Parents had conversations with children about judgment. Companies restructured policies. Universities adopted the everyone belongs model. Because when a story is truth, when it is about genuine redemption, when it is told with real vulnerability, it resonates through barriers that nothing else can cross. Doug now speaks on a stage before thousands of people. But he does not speak as a celebrity. He speaks as a man who made a mistake, who was confronted with compassion instead of judgment, who chose to grow. And in the audience, always, is Steph Curry. His daughter Riley, now 12 years old, watching the man who humiliated her become her mentor in empathy. And hundreds, at some events, thousands, of people who were touched by the program. People who learned that they truly belong. People who learned that their children belong. The final scene is of this crowd, people of all races, of all ages, of all socioeconomic backgrounds, from all the places where life had made them feel they did not belong. There are teenagers who grew up learning that there were places where they could not go. There are parents who saved money for years to be able to enter these spaces. There are small children who still have hope that the world is a place where everyone belongs. And Doug on the stage, with his voice breaking slightly, with tears in his eyes because he knows exactly how many people he hurt before becoming who he is now, saying, "Nobody deserved to be made to feel small. Nobody deserved to be made to feel inadequate. Nobody deserved to be made to feel that they did not belong. And I am here because someone believed I could be better. Steph Curry had every right to destroy me. I deserved to be destroyed. But instead, he offered redemption. Now, I am here to offer the same thing to you. All of us are capable of more. All of us are capable of genuine change. And everyone, each one of us, truly belongs in every space we choose to occupy. The message is simple, but revolutionary. There is a difference between destroying someone for a mistake and transforming someone through education. Compassion can change a person. A transformed person can change a culture. And a transformed culture can change the world. Because when you see someone, truly see, beyond categories, beyond appearances, beyond protocols, beyond judgments, you can no longer treat them as if they do not belong. You can no longer categorize. You can no longer quickly decide that someone is inadequate. Because you saw them as people, complex, valuable, deserving of space, deserving of belonging, and that is the truth that Doug now carries, and that Steph Curry chose to plant, and that Riley helps to disseminate every day, and that Carlos, the boy whose shoe his mother saved 8 months to buy, now feels in his heart, and that Marcus, the 20-year manager who cried when he heard Doug's story, now teaches to other managers, and that millions of people around the world who saw this story, who shared it, who took it into their own lives, now understand profoundly. Because the truth about belonging is not about conformity. It is not about looking right, or speaking right, or coming from a certain place. It is not about having the appropriate clothes, or the appropriate amount of money, or knowing the right cultural references. It is about being seen. It is about being honored. It is about being in spaces, any space, all spaces, and feeling profoundly that you have the right to be there, that you are welcome, that your existence matters, that you are adequate, that you belong. Everyone belongs. And that truth, once sown, can no longer be contained.